60 anos atrás, o segredo da nossa vida a nível molecular começou a ser desvendado quando dois gênios da biologia, James Watson e Francis Crick, explicaram pela primeira vez a estrutura do DNA, a sequência de informações genéticas que determina quem nós somos, o que acontece no nosso corpo e o que nós passamos para as nossas filhas e nossos filhos.
Truly remarkable. In fact, one could argue it was the most impressive technological advance ever in biomedical research.
Mais recentemente, 10 anos atrás, houve um outro marco importante: a finalização do Projeto Genoma, a imensa tarefa de identificar 3 bilhões de informações de DNA contidas nos mais de 20 mil genes de cada ser humano. Esse é um dos lugares onde isso foi feito: o Instituto de Pesquisas do Genoma do governo americano, que continua sendo o maior centro de promoção de estudos nessa área. O nosso programa vai contar a história dessa descoberta genética que mudou e vai mudar muito mais a nossa vida. O Globo News Ciência e Tecnologia está só começando. Foi um momento histórico, comparável ao pouso na Lua, mas em lugar de acontecer em uma escala enorme, envolvendo uma distância de milhares de quilômetros, aconteceu em uma dimensão minúscula, medida em bilionésimos de centímetros. Quando James Watson e Francis Crick apresentaram o trabalho que renderia um prêmio Nobel em 1962, já se sabia que o DNA era a origem das informações genéticas do ser humano. Mas a estrutura química permanecia um grande mistério. Na mesma época, começo da década de 50, 2 cientistas da Universidade de Harvard estavam, com colegas no mundo inteiro, na corrida para ver quem revelaria primeiro os segredos dessa molécula. Os cientistas já sabiam que o DNA era formado por pares de proteínas, chamadas adenina e timina, citosina e guanina. Mas faltava entender como as peças do maior quebra-cabeças da natureza se encaixavam para formar o código de instruções de cada célula do nosso corpo. Com a ajuda de raios-x, cientistas como Rosalind Franklin e Maurice Wilkins estavam obtendo fotografias que davam pistas de como tudo se combinava. Mas foi a genialidade de Watson e Crick que destravou a chave do enigma.
It was a combination of extremely hard work, 4 actually extremely insightful people who were central to doing the work, and it's impossible to overstate the significance of that discovery. Now this gets into issues of the nature of science. Other people were working on solving the double helix. If Watson and Crick hadn't solved it, it would have been solved by others. They came up with that through a combination of inference and theoretical model building and some actual physical data that was collected by Rosalind Franklin and Maurice Wilkins, where they were firing X-ray beams at dried samples of DNA, and they were getting patterns that could be deconvoluted mathematically to give you a range of possible structures. And the one that sort of jumped out from what's called the X-ray diffraction pattern they generated looked helical. Now that didn't reveal the structure in detail. That really was up to Watson and Crick to apply their insights about the shapes of chemical molecules and how things could fit together. And that's where the work was really quite brilliant and insightful. In a very clever line at the last sentence of their paper, they alluded to what would be a natural implication of the double helical structure that they proposed. And it was something to the effect that our model, it does not escape us that our model immediately suggests a method for replication. And so the double helix is
2 strands of, okay.
2 strands which are closely paired together. The 2 different colors representing the 2 different strands, they end up being linked in a chain, so within a single long DNA molecule, we've got very tight chemical bonding here and here, but within this space, you've got very weak chemical bonding. And so one of the things that Watson and Crick recognized, and we've subsequently demonstrated to be the method by which inheritance happens, is these strands can separate, and each one can then serve as a template for building a second strand. And so they can end up completely unwinding, and as you build a second strand on each one, you end up with two separate molecules that are identical to each other. Two new double helices.
É a maneira de se duplicar que torna o DNA tão especial. Entender esse mecanismo mostrou como as células do nosso corpo se multiplicam e regulam todas as reações químicas de cada ser vivo. A molécula é tão complexa que menos de 2% das informações que ela contém nos separam dos chimpanzés, a espécie mais similar à nossa no mundo animal.
Each one of us is completely unique from a genetic standpoint, and in fact from the standpoint that each of us is raised in a unique environment. And that environment has an interplay with the genetic variation to make us each individuals in the truest sense of the word. People used to talk about cancer as a disease. Well, for a long time we've known that there are more than 100 different types of cancers, for example, affecting different tissues, different organs. Now we know that for each one of those individual types of cancer, every person has a unique version of that cancer. So not everybody's stomach cancer is the same kind of stomach cancer and won't necessarily have the same history as the disease develops or is treated.
Eric Green é diretor do Instituto de Pesquisas do Genoma Humano dos Estados Unidos. Trabalhando desde o começo da ciência genética, ele lembra a época em que o conceito de genômica, o estudo e o uso dos genes para descobrir e curar doenças, sequer existia.
When I graduated medical school, I'm not even sure I had ever used the word genomics. I graduated medical school 3 years before the Human Genome Project began. But I was there on the front line of the Human Genome Project when it started. That's really where I began my career in this field. But even then, I knew that this would lead us to a new place. But even then, I didn't quite have the focus on what that would look like and how we actually practice medicine. And while I don't claim I know that precisely now, some 23 years later, it's much clearer than it was even 10 years ago, and every month that goes by it gets a bit clearer.
O projeto Genoma está finalizado há 10 anos. As promessas de novos tratamentos e curas, que eram feitas uma década atrás, hoje estão mais realistas. E muitas estão perto de serem cumpridas.
In the excitement of having completed the Human Genome Project, and again, I was there at the finish line, just like I was there at the starting line, there was no question, there was incredible enthusiasm having accomplished something that 13 years earlier we had no idea how we were actually going to really sequence the human genome. And without question, in the celebratory mode of completing the Genome Project, lots of promises were made. We'll find all the genetic causes of all diseases quickly, and then we'll figure out all the cures, and we will totally change the face of medicine. And I actually believe that a lot of that will come true to a large extent. But realistically, it wasn't going to happen in 10 years.
Expectations that we had for advancements in the wake of the Human Genome Project were based on, I think, a very good understanding of where we were at the time in what we thought we knew about the genome, and the inherent optimism and idealism, in fact, of lots of the researchers and clinicians who were doing the work. Now, what that leads to sometimes is an over-optimism, an expectation that progress will be more rapid. And to some extent that has been a consequence of what we've learned since the Human Genome Project. We're getting more traction now. At the same time, we're recognizing that there's these additional levels of variation in the genome that we don't know how to fully understand, things that have only become clear since we sequenced the original reference genome.
The other landmark is 10 years ago when the Genome Project ended. We all believed that someday this would be relevant for medical care, for clinical care, taking care of patients. But that was a pretty blurry idea. We sort of could see a path forward, but it really wasn't relevant to you as a patient or to your friend or family member as a patient. 10 years later, it's getting relevant. And we can see over the next 3 to 5 years, it'll be incredibly relevant. There's some kinds of childhood cancers that were a death sentence 2 or 3 decades ago, and now the cures are almost nearly all the time for those types of cancer. And I think increasingly, and if you look at heart disease and even adult forms of cancer, certain ones we see major improvements in survival. Look what's going on in HIV/AIDS. Much, much better circumstance. I think we will continue to see that.
Mesmo décadas depois de a estrutura ser explicada por Watson e Crick, o DNA continua chamando a atenção. Recentemente, cientistas de Harvard anunciaram que essa incrível molécula é capaz de armazenar dados. O impacto é enorme. Apenas 1 grama de DNA consegue armazenar o equivalente a 100 bilhões de DVDs. E isso torna a quantidade de informações armazenadas de forma biológica extraordinária, porque se o DNA de todas as nossas células fosse alinhado de ponta a ponta, o resultado seria uma cadeia de mais de 1 bilhão de quilômetros de comprimento, que cobriria a distância da Terra até Saturno. Cientistas anunciaram recentemente que já são capazes de desligar em laboratório o cromossomo responsável pela síndrome de Down. É o primeiro passo em um longo caminho para a cura e a longevidade controlada pelos nossos genes. Mas antes que as promessas se tornem realidade, o avanço do sequenciamento do DNA nos diagnósticos levanta uma questão. Será que queremos ser informados de quando os nossos genes têm uma mutação problemática, quando não há tratamento possível?
These types of investigations deeply into disease causation and personalizing the treatment is largely still being done experimentally, not as a matter of routine care, although that's beginning to happen some places. But the other issue is that even if we know the specific genetic differences that may lead to disease, there's not a guarantee that we've got a drug on the shelf that we may have used for something else that will end up helping in that particular case. That's going to be one of the challenges going forward in the next 10 years. It's much more likely that we will see very rapid advances in discovery, finding, for example, mutations for diseases where we didn't have a cause or we're finding a new cause, and a slower rate of improvement or progress when it comes to trying to individualize treatment. And so from an ethical standpoint, it actually is a fairly significant issue and a matter of robust debate and investigation now. What is in the patient's best interest? How much autonomy should a patient have in knowing what mutations and potential diseases they might be at risk for in the future, when in fact some of those diseases don't have a cure or treatment. If you're in a situation where you have a family history, you've got past relatives, well, we can do a test for Huntington's disease genetically and find out whether or not you've got a mutation that will lead to the disease. Then you are faced with the choice of, do I want to get this test, or would you rather not know? And it's even more complicated because Huntington's disease strikes usually after people's reproductive years. So they may already have children. So if I were to get tested, it was determined that I had one of these serious mutations that leads to Huntington's disease, and I have children, now my children are at risk because I already know I have the mutation.
Right.
Could have been passed on to them. That can alter their lives, the mere knowledge of that. So the knowledge of it can alter my life in that There may be some negative psychological effects. I may become very depressed about this. On the other hand, it allows me now an opportunity to plan differently for the future.
Dr. Lucas Wortman, a researcher in leukemia, who got leukemia, and they discovered that using a kidney cancer drug, they could attack the leukemia, and they did with success. Mm-hmm. When would you, me, as persons, will see that kind of practical help?
So the example you give, tip of the iceberg. But we can see the tip. 10 years ago, we didn't even really see that tip. And the lead example I would have given, you just gave, cancer. That's where we're going to see this application of genome sequencing play out in the clinic for real. It's already happening. It's happening in these anecdotal cases like you just gave, and it's happening actually for some types of cancer. It's almost now routine to have some genomic test, in some cases complete genome sequencing. We're not quite at the stage where all cancers, all patients, but within every single year over the next decade, you will see more and more and more examples where we are changing how we are dealing with cancer by using genomic technologies.
A atriz Angelina Jolie preferiu se antecipar. Ela perdeu a mãe e, mais recentemente, uma tia para o câncer. Para evitar um destino parecido, ela preferiu retirar os seios ao descobrir uma mutação em seu gene BRCA1, que a torna mais propensa a desenvolver câncer de mamas e ovários. Mas dilemas assim não impedem ninguém de conhecer a própria genotipagem. É um teste simples, capaz de mostrar as raízes genéticas.
I haven't had my genome sequenced, but I have had my genome genotyped through one of the personal genetics companies.
Mm-hmm. What's the difference?
The difference is the level of resolution. To have your entire genome sequenced means all 3 billion base pairs of DNA sequence are being identified. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot more variation when you look at the full genome than if you're looking at genotyping 600,000 or 1 million different individual bases. Mm-hmm. I don't recommend that people do this as a matter of routine. I have some expertise in the area, and so it's much easier for me to put in context what I see in my genome, and I can dig into the technical details and understand all of that. The average person doesn't have access necessarily to a genetic counselor or somebody who can really help them interpret what they might find out.
So the analogy to putting a person on the moon, and I was a child then, but I was there, and watching on television, fixated on watching the first steps on the moon, I would say that analogy plays out to the Human Genome Project. It was a highly focused goal, and the Human Genome Project was biology's moonshot.
Watson e Crick apresentaram sua descoberta ao mundo 60 anos atrás. 10 anos já se passaram desde que cientistas sequenciaram todas as combinações que compõem o nosso manual de instruções genético. Muito foi feito, mas os próprios geneticistas reconhecem que estamos apenas começando a entender o que nos torna seres vivos. O código está sendo decifrado cada vez em maiores detalhes, mas ainda não se sabe claramente, por exemplo, a influência que o nosso meio ambiente tem em nossa carga genética.
It's not only genetic variation that explains who we are and if we end up getting sick, how the course of that disease develops. It's the unique environments that each of us lives within. So the environment and the genes interact very closely together. And in fact, one of the fundamental discoveries just in recent years is how environment can change DNA, not through mutations and changing the individual bases, but can chemically modify those bases in ways. The function can change the function within a generation, and some of those changes can be inherited to future generations. That's a really, really powerful discovery in the last 20 years. We don't know what the limits of that are. We know that there are foods that we can eat that have this effect on DNA. There are already some behavioral studies in mice that show that the care that newborn mice receive from their mother can alter their DNA in ways that can be inherited. So it's theoretically possible, although we don't have any evidence of this yet, that a lifetime of moral choices may result in these kinds of epigenetic changes to DNA. That's sort of speculation at this point. I would rate them right up there as important as relativity. Understanding the molecular basis of our traits, including health and disease traits, and the basis of inheritance is fundamentally significant in that it alters how we think about ourselves. And one of the most profound ways we've seen that is at the molecular level, seeing how similar we are with other species. The fact that we share the same fundamental molecule of inheritance with every other species, and that we can understand how evolutionary change can be explained at the level of the DNA. That is profound. And so what we've seen with genetics is the insight of Charles Darwin back in the middle of the 19th century has come to fruition in genetics. We have been able to tie evolution to inheritance. And that is certainly as profound as quantum theory or relativity.